You're tuned to Night Nerves, where if it's scary, creepy, thrilling, or disturbing, we read it, watch it, and talk about it. I'm Sam, and today I am going to answer all your questions that you asked in the previous video. That was the video celebrating 5,000 subscribers. So thank you for those who left a comment, who asked a question. We had in total, as of now, 68 comments on that video. Only a small handful of them are ones I replied to. For the most part, I really just hearted all the people who asked a question, who left a comment. That being said, I do not believe I'll have the breath to answer all of those questions. I'm gonna do my best though. I'm gonna go through and answer as many as I can. I decided I'm gonna set a timer for 25 minutes. I don't know if this video will be 25 minutes long, a little less, a little bit more. I don't know what will get left on the cutting room floor in the edit, but I hope to answer your question, and if I don't answer it in this video, I hope to answer it in a future video. There are a lot of really great questions that you guys asked in that last video. I even think there's some questions that merit their own video. Great questions for a discussion, for just a topical conversation in a video. So if I notice one of those questions and I come to it, I might just say, we're gonna save that for another video. Anyways, enough of me talking. Let's do what we have. It's not focusing. There we go. We got 25 minutes on the clock. Let's do this. Starting at the top, BJ Low 85 asked 7 questions in total. He said at the bottom, sorry to the long list, LOL smiley face. We'll go question by question here. Again, trying to go as fast as I can. What do you do for a job? I supervise a program that gives services to adults with disabilities. It's a relatively new job for me. I've been here about 2 months, going on 3. I really enjoy it. It's very rewarding. It's one of the first jobs I've had where when I look at the clock, I'm not concerned with, oh, how long is it until I'm off? I'm looking at it and going, how much time do I have to accomplish everything I want to accomplish? Next question is, how much do you read in a day? My answer is never enough. It really depends on the day. If it's a weekend where I have nothing to do, it's like a lazy weekend where I can just sit around, I can read, those are the best. And I typically get a lot more reading done on those days than I do a day during the week. But I used to have a goal of reading 40 to 50 pages a day, and I read a lot when that was going on, but there's honestly some days where I'm just reading 5 pages, hopefully more than that. The irony of having a BookTube channel is I sometimes spend more time editing videos, recording videos, talking about reading books, and talking about the books I've read than I do reading new books. Moving right along, we have question 3. Multiple books at once or just one? These are all great questions. I used to read multiple books at once, but now I try to keep it to one. If I'm really struggling with a book, I will pick up another one, or I'll read short stories. That's something. I'll always throw in a couple short stories if I'm in a little bit of a slump, or just if I want to take a little bit of a break. But typically if I pick up a whole nother book and start reading it, it's a bad sign for the book that I was reading before that, and chances are I won't finish that book. So yeah, I'm kind of just one at a time I try to do. Do I do audiobooks? I do, though I've struggled more recently to get into the audiobooks. I've started, I wanna say maybe more than 5, and I've DNF'd them. I've really been struggling to stay focused, stay engaged with them. I think in a perfect world, you would have both a book and the audiobook of something you wanted to read. So you would start, I feel like you have to start with the first couple chapters, physically reading the book, having it in front of you to really give it your full attention, get focused. And then after that, it is nice to have an audiobook, something you can listen to while you're doing chores, while you're going for a walk, a drive, while you're multitasking. So yes, on audiobooks, but I haven't had a lot of success with them recently. Favorite vintage cover art? That's too hard to answer. I'm gonna skip that one. What got you into vintage horror reading? That's another, that one is a video I've thought of doing, so great question. We're gonna do that in another video. And the last question is the Holy Grail you are looking for to get. Another tough question. I don't really have a specific Holy Grail that I can think of. There's nothing that I'm in a big hurry to get, or there's no white whales that I can really think of. But we're gonna keep going. Thank you again, BJ Lowe. 887 Frodo asked, what is the scariest book you have read? But also, what's the trashiest and most embarrassing book that you like? I really struggle with questions that are, what's the best, what's the scariest? I'll always default to what's the most recent best, or what's the most recent scariest book I've read. And in this case, I would say Stephen King's The Shining. I first read this, I think in the 6th grade. It was one of the first Stephen King books that I got, that I read, and I remember really liking it back then. But since then, I've watched the Kubrick film a number of times, and it was funny, this is gonna end up being a long story, but I read the book, I was really, really excited to watch the movie because it seemed like the most celebrated Stephen King adaptation at the time when I was getting into it. And I read the book was excellent. I was like, I can't wait to see how this got made into a movie. And for anyone that's read The Shining and then watched Kubrick's film of The Shining, they're very, very different. And I initially really didn't like the movie of The Shining. It took me a while for me to really accept it and come to enjoy it. Because of that, because I read the book and I've seen The Shining a handful of times, I'd forgotten a lot about the book and what was in the book, what was in the movie. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I was having a Stephen King resurgence where I was getting into his books again. I hadn't read any Stephen King in a while, and I read something from him that I really enjoyed, and I just started reading a bunch of stuff, and I had really been wanting to reread The Shining. And I was dog sitting at a family friend's house. They're very wealthy, they have a huge house, and I thought, what better time to crack open The Shining and give it a reread. So I did that, and man, it was very scary at times to be reading The Shining and be in this big, strange house all alone. So yeah, I'm gonna go with The Shining. For trashiest book, I don't know if I can pinpoint a specific book, and there's no books that I read that are really embarrassing to me. I'm proud of all the books I choose to read and talk about on this channel, and I have a soft spot for trashy books. But I will say Richard Lehman, I always feel like I need to qualify a lot of the reasons why I'm recommending a Lehman book. Definitely all the pervy stuff. So yeah, I would just say basically anything by Richard Lehman. Nate Amaro 9817 asks, what do you think is being done right now within the horror genre in publishing, movies, and TV? And what do you think can be improved upon? A great question, one that I think could be its own video, but I'll answer the first part of that. What do I think is being done right now within the horror genre in publishing, movies, television? I like that right now, it's kind of anything goes. There's no real trends in horror, whether it be books or movies right now that I notice. Lowbrow slasher stuff is in right now, but also a lot of more cerebral and heady horror movies and horror novels are in as well. I think of like 10 years ago when The Witch, Hereditary, and Get Out, among some others, when those movies came out, there was this huge trend in elevated horror. It had to have metaphor, theme. There had to be this deeper meaning behind everything that was horror. And I think even some of the trashiest horror, you can pull out a lot of meaning. There's a lot of subtext there. I think the horror genre is great for that. It's rich in subtext, it's rich in metaphor. But a movie like Get Out, for example, because it dealt with racism and it used horror as a vehicle to talk about it, a lot of people, like my parents don't watch horror movies, they went and they saw Get Out. So many people were talking about it. I think a lot of filmmakers and a lot of authors saw this as an opportunity to capitalize on that. And just like the zombie craze years before, I got sick of seeing it. I just wanted mindless, trashy horror. And I think now the playing field is even. I'm sure there'll be a new cycle. There'll be a new trend, whether it's werewolves, vampires, something else. It always comes in waves, and I like that right now. There's nothing that I notice that's really in style. I'm spending way too much time on these questions. It says I have 12 minutes left. I might extend that. I'm gonna keep going. All right, Divya Kanan 7548 says, congratulations, Sam, you deserve it. Thank you. How did you get into horror? Was there a time in your life, maybe when you were little, when you were terrified of horror? When I think of getting into horror, I remember specifically there was a kid's book called In a Dark, Dark Room, and it was a horror anthology, again meant for kids. And I remember my parents reading those to me before bedtime, and I remember picking up that book and reading a lot of the stories myself. In particular, one that stands out was called The Green Ribbon. Probably a lot of people my age are familiar with this book. If you are a 90s baby, The Green Ribbon, a very disturbing story for a kid's book. But I think what solidified me as a horror fan was the Goosebumps series. That's what got me into reading. That's what got me into horror. Goosebumps was pivotal for me. Kendra H6805 says, stay spooky sticker. Then question, what was an event / book / movie / point in your life that got you into horror? Kind of similar to the other question, I would say Goosebumps, definitely. I think also going to, you know what, I can add to this. I don't know if anyone else did this. In the 5th grade in elementary school, we did something called outdoor ed, which is where you went and you lived in a cabin in the woods for a while with your classmates. You had counselors, and you learned a lot of stuff about the outdoors, about being away from technology, from TV. During that time, they would do scary stories around the campfire at night. And one of them that I heard was the story of Sasquatch, told by our camp counselor. I believe his name was Buzzard. All the camp counselors had a name that was after an animal. He told us the story of Sasquatch around the fireplace. We hiked to different areas where the Sasquatch had been, and I loved it. And I remember after that, being really scared when that was going on and asking Buzzard a lot of questions about the origins of Sasquatch. I think at that point, talking to him, and he might have pointed something out, but I realized I was really, really into spooky stuff. James Bombaugh, I think that's meant to say James Bombaugh. James Bombaugh asked 3 questions here. He says, what other booktubers were your biggest influence before you started? Question number 2 is favorite independent horror author. And 3, are you a Godzilla fan? Honestly, I didn't watch a lot of booktube before starting this channel. I had looked up some stuff as far as vintage horror goes on YouTube, and 2 channels that I did watch a fair amount of videos from. One is Paperback Mania. That's Leon the Paperback Maniac's channel. He doesn't do it anymore, but he almost exclusively reviewed vintage horror paperbacks, a lot of trashy stuff, and I really enjoyed his videos. People have told me that I should try to contact him, and I actually tried to do so. I got in touch with someone that knew him, and they gave me his email. I reached out to him. I did not hear back, though. Fingers crossed, maybe he watches this video, or he gets back to me someday. That would be really cool. And the other one, the first one that really came on my radar, was Cameron Chaney at Library Macabre. I just really liked his aesthetic, his energy, what he talked about. We're kind of kindred spirits as far as what we're into. He loves vintage horror. He's also a huge R.L. Stine fan, a huge fan of YA horror, and really, really cool. We actually correspond now. We talk back and forth. We talk about content we're making, books we're reading. We recently buddy read a book together. I don't know if we'll do a video for that. Those are the 2 main ones that I look to for influence, and ones that definitely got me excited about starting my own channel. Favorite independent author is way too hard. I've also become friends with a lot of independent authors, so I don't feel like I have a good bias to answer that question. I'm gonna skip that one. And am I a Godzilla fan? I wouldn't call myself a fan, but I'm pro Godzilla. I think it's, he's a huge radioactive lizard. What's not to like? I'm very behind on my Godzilla movies, basically all the new ones I haven't seen, but yeah, Godzilla's cool. JJ Suni-sun asked, what horror book has stuck in your head the most? That's open to interpretation. Scary, disturbing, well-written, etc. That's really one I would need to think more on. I will I'm gonna hope to get back to that one in a later video. JJ Suni-san, thank you for the question. Oh wow, there's 3 minutes and 40 seconds right now on my timer. Namshini5254 says, yay, congrats for this. I always watch your vids because I also love books, hee hee. Question, how many books do you have in your collection? I'm curious from the beginning, haha. I have no idea. Too many. It's a mess. People have asked for a tour. It's just a mess and it's embarrassing. Like I have books back here. It looks like I set them up just to look nice and I tried to make them look nice, but the real reason they're here is because I just don't have a lot of room for books. I live in a small apartment. I have some books at my parents' house. They let me store some books there. I really just need a bigger house or bigger apartment. Be nice to have a house. Too many books. Thanks for the question. S-Druss83 asked, favorite non-horror novel? What's your horror hot take? Like a super popular book that you hate? Favorite non-horror book. I do, believe it or not, I do read books that are not horror. The last good non-horror book, last great non-horror book that I remember reading was actually a book called The Dirt. It was written by the members of the band Motley Crue. It was a book I'd heard about. It'd been out for a while and I'd heard about it, and I've read The Heroin Diaries by Nikki Sixx, and I've read a handful of other rock and roll biographies, autobiographies, but I hadn't read The Dirt for whatever reason. And actually I found a copy at a little library and I decided to read it, and man, it's a great book. It's really interesting how they tell the story too, because all the band members contribute to the stories, and they kind of start at the beginning of when they started out, when they were hanging out together, when they were playing the Sunset Strip, getting signed. And so all the band members will pitch in part of the book, they'll tell their part of the story, but there's also other people that are close to the band, Slash from Guns N' Roses, Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses, their band manager, other people who were close to the band, they contribute as well. And it's really interesting. I think when the book is firing on all cylinders is when there's sort of a bigger event. Maybe it's some drama that happened with the band, maybe it's something really exciting, and you get to hear everyone's perspective, everyone in the band's perspective, an outsider perspective from someone outside of the band. And it's really interesting to see how similar or dissimilar everyone's account is of those events. Adam RN83, the timer went off already. I'm still going. I'm just gonna do this until I have to tap out. Adam RN83. Also, side note, it's really, really cool that I recognize a lot of these names. These are people who I don't know in real life, but they're people who have commented on these videos before. They've commented on Instagram posts, on Goodreads, and Adam is one of those people. Adam says, congrats on 5K, brother. What's a book that you related to the antagonist the most and felt their actions were justified? Also for the Patreon, let's do a book of the month read along with discussion, but none of those obscure Canadian horror novels nobody else can find. Haha. I see what you're talking about there, Adam. Love the work, keep it up. I appreciate the comment. Man, that's, I feel like that could be a video in itself. It feels like a cop-out. I really can't think of a antagonist right now that I felt their actions were justified. I will address this, the Patreon. I could totally see doing like a book of the month with the Patreon. That would, first I'm gonna focus on getting that $5 tier for Patreon. I think this would not be included with the $5 tier. This is definitely something that would be more involved, something that would take more planning, but I like that. I would love to do more stuff in these videos that if you guys want to participate in, like the seasonal horror stuff. I'm curious what you guys are reading. If you guys are seasonal readers, maybe we should come up with a tag for those so other people can share what they're reading. We can have more of a discourse about it. Thank you so much for the comment, Adam. I feel like I didn't really answer your question, but I appreciate it nonetheless. It sounds like I just kind of sidestepped everything you asked. Extreme Reviews 11 asked, what is your opinion on Richard Lehman? What is the worst trope in horror and your favorite? If you could generate a plot and have the entire book in front of you, what would the plot be? Some heavy-hitting questions right there. I'm gonna answer that first question. I think the rest of those are good topics for a future video. What is my opinion on Richard Lehman? I'm a Richard Lehman fan. I don't know if I'm proud of that, but I always look forward to reading a Richard Lehman novel. I've picked out my summer horror reading list, and I knew going into that I had to read a Richard Lehman book. He's one of those authors for me, as well as Stephen King, as well as Jack Ketchum, that I've actually stopped myself from reading too much of their stuff because I always want to know that there's a Stephen King book waiting for me that I haven't read yet that I can pick up and read for the first time, a Richard Lehman book that I could do the same with, a Jack Ketchum book that I can do the same with. Again, I think I talked about it in a previous comment, but he's a hard author to defend, one that is definitely trashy, definitely somewhat embarrassing, but just a very entertaining horror author. I feel like he's becoming more accepted though. Like I see more people talking about Richard Lehman, celebrating his books, his stories. Despite his peccadillos, people seem to really enjoy his stuff. Wu-Tang Clan 500 asked, what are my hobbies? Favorite music / band / artist? Favorite movie and show as a kid? What made you so passionate about horror? And goals for the channel / personal goals. Where do I start with this? Hobbies. So outside of reading, watching horror movies, general stuff that has to do with horror, I love getting exercise. So I'm a big walker. It sounds like an old person exercise, but man, few things in life outside of reading, outside of things that relate to the horror genre, few things in life bring me as much pleasure as going on a nice walk around dusk, one of my favorite times, in the early morning if I'm up. But man, I just love walking. And now actually, if I'm going somewhere and it's a new neighborhood, I'll get excited about walking after, like if I'm visiting a friend or I'm going to like a dinner party or something, I'll get excited and be like, oh man, I'm gonna go for a walk after this thing, especially after a meal. There's nothing like a nice walk after a meal. Yeah, that's a lot about walking. I also like hiking. I love riding a bike, whether it's road cycling, mountain biking. Music that's the next question, but I love listening to music. I know everyone says, I listen to everything. I'm one of those people, I listen to everything. Jazz, classical. I actually started in high school. I played in jazz band, I played bass, but I also love heavy metal. I've talked about it on this channel before. I love punk rock. I've played in heavy metal. I've played in punk bands before. I've played in hard rock bands. Right now, I'm in a big emo pop punk phase. I love country music, both old and new. I don't want to go down the artist path because I feel like I'll spend way too much time answering this question. I'm gonna keep going. Favorite movie and show as a kid? When I think of being a kid, I think of cartoons. Obviously, Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark were great shows that I loved. But if we're talking like kids shows, cartoons, I was a huge Scooby-Doo fan. I loved the original Scooby-Doo show. Dexter's Laboratory was another one I remember really liking. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. I was a big Cartoon Network guy. Also, Nickelodeon had some cool stuff too. But yeah, again, I'm a 90s baby. What made you so passionate about horror? I feel like I answered this in a previous question. And then goals for the channel / personal goals. For the channel, it's just to keep growing, to keep finding ways to make it be fun. It's fun doing things like this that feel like it breaks convention for the channel. I'm gonna keep it at that for now. Thank you for the questions. Jaden Nagel 7251 says, congrats on the 5K. Do you think watching so much horror has actually prepared you to handle a real life scary situation if it ever happened? Absolutely. I talked a little bit about my job, but there's a lot of crazy stuff that pops up, that happens at work, that happens in everyday life, that I feel, because I'm a horror fan, that I feel like I'm better equipped to deal with stressful situations, to deal with crazy situations that happen in life. I can definitely think of times where something mildly traumatic has happened to me or my friends or my family, and I have felt like I've been the calm one and the voice of reason in the group where I'm like, okay, let's not freak out. We got this. We're gonna figure this out. I would attribute all of that to my experience with the horror genre. Thank you so much for the question, Jaden. Shady Side Library commented, congrats mate, confetti emoji, excited for the future of the channel Here's a question for you. Do you ever do any gaming? Horror or non-related? If so, what console? I do not game. The only video game console I've ever owned is a Nintendo 64. That was a present that I got in 3rd grade, I believe. And shortly after that, GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox came out and basically made Nintendo 64 obsolete, but my parents were not willing to buy me another console and I didn't have the money to do it. I'm pretty sure they bought the Nintendo for me because it was starting to go on sale because stores were getting ready for the GameCube, for the PlayStation 2, for the Xbox. I loved that thing when I was a kid, but I don't play really anymore. I have thought, one thing for the Patreon that I've thought of doing is doing like a live stream where I play a horror themed video game, maybe on my Nintendo 64, and we just hang out, we chat. If that sounds like something you would be into, let me know down below. I never have enough time in the day to do the stuff that I wanna do. But yeah, if you have a good horror themed video game recommendation, one that's not a big time investment, one that you can casually play, one I'm not gonna feel like I need to stay up for hours finishing the game, I would love to know that as well. Thanks for the question, Shadyside Library. Whatever Forever asked 3 questions here. Said, trying to think of some fun questions. 1, where, location, setting, and when do you enjoy reading the most? I always like to see how people incorporate reading into their life. I love reading on my bed. I think there's so many positions you can get comfortable in on your bed. I love laying on my back, holding the book over my head. Sometimes I hold it with one hand. I think I'm giving too many details for the question, but yeah, I like reading on my bed. It doesn't really matter the time of day. It is kind of fun when it's a little dark and you can turn on a light. You put some music on to set the mood. Favorite non-horror read lately or ever, if you've only read horror recently, haha. The Dirt, I would say, even though that was a couple years ago. I remember I was reading The Dirt when I moved into this apartment and I'd already started reading it. I remember driving to this different city and just thinking about the book a lot. Another little tidbit that I left out when I was answering that question previously. And number 3, book you've wanted for ages but haven't pulled the trigger on yet. I don't know, it would probably be like, I used to have a ton of Stephen King hardcovers and like an idiot, I donated them at one point. When I first moved out my parents' house years ago, I donated so many of my books. I just like gave them away because I was like, you know what, I'll just go to a library and I can read all these at the library. And the Stephen King stuff was fine, you can get that at a library, but there's a lot of stuff that I gave away that you can't get at a library. Yeah. Big regret. Right now I'm in a phase where I'm like, I'm not buying any Stephen King. His books are still ones you can get at the library that are easily accessible. I don't need to be spending money on Stephen King. So it would probably be one of his books. That didn't really answer the question, but great questions. Thank you for them. Alistair Weir 5529 says, there's so many other booktube channels out there, horror as well. Were you put off or discouraged to start a channel? And did you plan to set yourself apart? I was definitely discouraged to start a channel. One of the reasons why I didn't want to start one in the first place, I feel like almost any topic you can think of that you would make a channel for, there's gonna be people that are doing it already. What convinced me to start this was this being like an open diary for my reading journey and talking about the stuff I'm reading, my experience with it. And it's even been fun, not that I go back and watch my videos often, but I like the idea that I can go back and see what I read in summer of 2024, how I ranked those books. I think cataloging the stuff I'm into with horror through this channel is what really motivated me. He also asks, often you say you don't know what this book is about, so I'm curious as to whether you have a TBR list that you scour eBay and use bookshops for, or are you more of a mood buyer, buying vintage horror books based on the cover, title, and blurb? It's a mix of both. A big way I discover authors is reading anthologies, also certain publications like leisure horror, like reading a leisure horror book that I really like and going and finding other leisure horror books, or Onyx is one of those imprints that like just does horror. So when I first read a good Onyx book, I was like, oh, I want to find like who put out this book. I want to find more of these. And then obviously you read a book that you really like from an author and you go and look at other books in their catalog, other books that are related to those books or similar to them. So I don't have a specific formula for how I look for books, how I discover books, but That's basically the gist of it. And then his last question, or last two questions, do you read any other genres? If so, who are some of your favorite non-horror books / authors? That definitely sounds, sorry, I'm hitting stuff over there. Definitely sounds like a topic for another video. And I'm gonna keep it at that. We're gonna keep going. I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. Pickle Muncher 99, it's quite a name. Pickle Muncher 99 asks, what kind of music do you like? Can you drop a playlist? I kind of answered that in a previous question. They did a heartbeat or a heart emoji, not like the Valentine's heart, but like a anatomically correct heart. And then they went on to say, we think you're cool, Sam. Thank you, Pickle Muncher. I think you're cool too. I think you're all cool. Of course, you watch Night Nerves videos. Why wouldn't you be cool? Also, where did you grow up? Your accent makes me giggle every time you say horror. I grew up in California, in Southern California. It's funny, you're not the first person that thinks I have an accent. I don't know. I think I just struggle to talk and make words. Thank you for the comment. Thank you for saying I'm cool. I hope that was a satisfying answer to your question. All right, I really gotta wrap this video up. The camera stopped recording a couple times. The battery just died on it. It's past my bedtime now. It's a school night. I'm losing my voice. Everything is signaling to me that I need to wrap this up. Thank you to everyone who left a comment again. I hope I answered yours. If not, again, I hope to answer it in a future video. I'm gonna do maybe 2 or 3 more. OllieAid677 says, well deserved, Sam. It's evident that people are tuning in because of Sam and not because of the horror content. Not to say that it isn't top tier content, but you are the reason this channel is thriving. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much. That's a very, very nice comment. And then they go on to ask, keeping that line of thought, if YouTube came out and banned all horror content, what would you transition the channel to? Man, it's hard. I mean, like I mentioned in the previous video to this, I wasn't even really interested in doing YouTube, and it's hard to think of doing anything besides horror. But I talked about The Dirt earlier. I could totally see doing a channel where I talk about like classic rock, the earlier parts of classic rock, the evolution of classic rock, punk rock, heavy metal. I think that would be really, really cool to do as well. I think it would be fun to be able to do deep dives into the genre. There's so many interesting stories about rock bands, about the drama, about collaborations that other bands have had. So I think maybe doing a channel like that where I just talk about rock and roll, about heavy metal, about punk rock. Thanks again for the comment and thank you for the question. Typical Books says, congratulations. That is a crow or raven emoji. This is pretty exciting, bad emoji. And as a fan, I'm so glad we all found your channel. Thank you so much. Has BookTube changed how or what you read? It looks like there's another question here. I'm gonna tackle that one first. It definitely has. I definitely read stuff just for me still, but there's always that thought like, okay, how am I going to incorporate this in the channel? I definitely am channel thinking when it comes to picking books. Night Nerves reminds me of old time horror radio. Have you ever had a fiction podcast or thought of it? Your voice would work well for narration. Thank you again. Very nice comment. Great question as well. I've not had a fiction podcast and I haven't really thought of one either. That would be really cool. I don't know what I would do, but I haven't thought of it. Now I am thinking of it. Thank you for mentioning it. Congrats again and best of luck towards 10,000 and a candle emoji. Thank you, that's Lydia from Typical Books. I appreciate the comment. Okay, I think I'm gonna do these last 2 comments here because they're shorter. I keep breaking promises and then I gotta cut it off. Journal Tree 1261 says, what is your favorite horror subgenre? They say slasher, supernatural, creature feature, etc. Slashers for sure. I feel like slashers were my gateway into horror films. When someone mentions horror, I think of the big 3, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and Halloween. Those are always ones I can return to and have a good time with. And I also am a big fan of body horror, particularly when it's done by David Cronenberg. And I like books with slashers. I like books with body horror. Slashers are typically just fun. There's obviously some elevated slashers now, but I think body horror in particular, I love gross stuff. I love visceral horror. And I think there's also a lot of themes and a lot of metaphors in body horror. So those would be my two, slashers and body horror. All right, folks, that does it for me. I'm going hoarse, I'm tired, and I feel very appreciative. This was a lot of fun. I hope you have as much fun watching this video as I had reading your questions and answering them. I'm recording this video midweek. This is literally the only time I'm going to have to respond to these questions. There's another video. I gotta do my summer horror TBR. That'll be coming out soon, hopefully. But this is the only free day I have before the weekend hits. And I'm going to be attending Monsterpalooza for the first time. I'm incredibly excited about it. If you are going, what am I saying? There's no way this video is coming out before Monsterpalooza happens. So if you are going to Monsterpalooza, I hope I see you there. I hope we get to chat. I hope we have a pleasant exchange. As always, give this video a like, leave it a comment, share it with a friend, with a family member, subscribe if you haven't already, and follow me on Instagram too. I'm at @night_nerves. Thanks again for hanging out with me. I hope to see you in the next one. Stay spooky.